Okay, everybody, it is Boothby and Jaryn Weir, and we are psychologists in Alberta working out of Sojourn Psychology, and we are going to be talking about EMDR trauma therapy yet again. So we're excited about this.
Yeah.
We had a good chat last time, lots of good feedback, and here we are again.
Yeah. Yeah, to start things off, I just wanted to make reference to our previous or our first EMDR video. I gave a little analogy that I'd heard about what EMDR is like and how to explain it to people, and it was based off of like this sandwich kind of analogy. And I noticed afterwards I didn't mention who it came from.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah, and so it's this lady named Kirsten Ferguson. So she was one of the trainers in my EMDR training. So I just wanted to make a shout out to her.
Awesome, and it is a great analogy. So if you haven't watched that video and you want to, it's on our Sojourn channel. So
Yeah.
awesome. So EMDR, I mean, it's a tool that we use frequently for all sorts of concerns that clients might be facing. And when I was revisiting, so I've been thinking about trauma and wanting to take some time to hop on the vlog and talk about different ways that I explain trauma. And I know Jaryn's passionate about trauma as well. And one of the trauma videos that I did, I talked about how I view trauma in the brain, and one of the things that I've come to notice when I'm explaining EMDR to people, I'll talk about how an event happens, and after it hits our event center in our brain, it goes into our amygdala, which to me sounded like a child's name when I first heard that term. So I think of our inner child sitting in our amygdala watching television. So if a traumatic event happens and it registers with our amygdala, it's like our inner child switches to the trauma channel, and all of the years of that trauma programming is connected onto one channel. And that really fits with EMDR, because with EMDR we do call it a trauma channel. So if we're in this trauma channel, all of the events and the sequences or the stories, the body memories, the dream-like expressions of that trauma are all going to be compiled together. And we do have different channels, so we're aware of that. Now, how I think of EMDR then, right or wrong, is we're trying to access that amygdala experience, the channel, and then for me, my experience of EMDR, and loosely how I explain it, because I'm not a neuropsychologist, I try to make things simple, is it's like all the streetlights are turned on in the brain. So when I'm in my trauma stuff, I'm on my channel, you're on your channel, then it's, with all the streetlights on, it's just things process through much more quickly. And that is the benefit of EMDR. It can really help us process through things. It's amazing what EMDR does to time. So a session can feel like, that felt like 3 hours, or it can feel like 30 seconds, because we're so in our brain's experience in the EMDR situation. And there's a little bit more of how I'd explain that, but I'm just wondering, for you, Jaryn, when you sort of think about that, the experience, the brain experience, your own experience with EMDR, or what you see with clients, what do you think about like the channels and all that stuff?
Yeah, just when I think about that trauma channel, it's like activating that neural network of anything that could be connected to I'm not safe, or I feel like I have no control, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not lovable. And so it's like activating that trauma channel. Any experience that may feel connected to that negative belief or negative cognition, it's activating it all so that your brain has the chance to finally heal those experiences and hopefully replace it with like a different positive belief.
Yeah, and that's nice. I like how you say heal, because that's really the aim of EMDR. And people will say, well, you're trying to desensitize, you're trying to numb away, but that's not actually it. It is reprocessing, de-escalating and reprocessing. So Dr. Carolyn Leaf, how she has explained, and she has beautiful images of what memories look like, healthy memories look like a tree, and trauma looks like a thorny bush. And so when I'm talking and I'm explaining EMDR, I'm like, you think of like biting your cheek. And when you bite your cheek and your tongue keeps going back to say, did that really happen? Did that really happen? Well, if I'm used to all these tree memories, and then there's this thorny bush, when I go to touch it, you think like if I literally touch a thorny bush, it's hard. So I'm trying to make sense of why there's these trees, and now here's this thorny bush. So it makes sense that our fight, flight, freeze, fawn, faint response is going to keep going back, because like, did this really happen? Did this really? Is this true? And so EMDR is desensitizing and reprocessing. I'm trying to help my body to feel, emotionally be present with that thorny tree or thorny bush. And I'm trying to help my body and my brain to, or not my body, but my brain to think. So those negative cognitions. Yeah.
I think even just what you mentioned, like, yeah, is this really true? Did this really happen? So many times I've heard from clients, like, I don't remember anything from my childhood, or I don't remember much from my upbringing. But it's really interesting during EMDR, they actually do start remembering things. Like, your brain is just activated in ways that it hasn't been in so long.
It's one of the most common things. I don't even feel surprised about it with EMDR, is somebody saying, I don't know why this is coming up. I don't know why I'm thinking about this, or all of a sudden this person. Because when you're in that channel, there's things inside of it. I used to worry more about making sure in EMDR that I'm on the channel with the person, and as time goes on I worry less, because I see how the session story of why the person is bringing together all these things makes sense. And even as we're talking, I mean, we all have trauma, so when we talk about how we're explaining to clients and clients' experience, it makes sense to us. Because EMDR is for little t trauma and big T trauma. And so trauma is really, when somebody comes in for mental health concern, they're saying, this is some sort of trauma in my life. So then there's all sorts of things we use EMDR for. You know, like, I don't know what, for you, with your experience with EMDR, what sort of things have you used it for?
Yeah, it can be like a wide range of things, like whether it's like for specific relationships with people, or maybe it's even targeting depression, or a certain experience that they've been through, like a really bad car accident, or it can be like anything, really.
Oh yeah, I think any clinical issue that a client comes in, EMDR could be used on it. Now, we were talking when we were planning this video of like, EMDR is actually so hard on us. So people, we don't often talk enough about how exhausting it is for the client. And I find it exhausting for myself when I'm doing it with a client. It's just a very intense work. But then if you do EMDR and then you feel anxious or nervous, or you just kind of don't know if you want to do it again, it's because it's exhausting. It's really hard on people.
Yeah, I've had clients do a few sessions with me after EMDR, and they get to a place where they're like, I don't know if I'm ready for today, right? And that's okay too, like, if you need a break from it, because it is, I mean, it does bring up a lot of things that people are sometimes unaware.
Yes.
And I think some people get a little bit nervous of like what might come up.
Yeah, and I think it's good if you are having a really intense time in your life, or if you have a physical ailment, it's really important to be in tune with yourself, that you can say, I don't want to do EMDR today. If there's a major crisis going on in your personal life, it's probably not a great time to do EMDR, and there's lots of other things we can do as well.
I guess, even in terms of like that desensitization part in EMDR, because I think a lot of people wonder or think that you're you're getting rid of the feelings or emotions connected to a certain event. And it's not necessarily getting rid of those feelings, because those feelings may always be there about a certain experience or person or event, but it's desensitizing it in a way that you don't feel as activated the next time you ever see around that person or in a similar experience, that you're able to like handle it a little bit better.
Yeah, and that your reptilian response, your fight, flight, freeze, fawn, faint, is not gonna take over. I mean, that's the real risk when our emotions are huge or our negative cognition is huge, that we run the risk of getting hooked into a behavior. You know, if my amygdala, if my emotion center is making the primary decisions for my behavior, I'm not using my wise mind. So the dialectical behavior, the mindfulness view. We want to be able to navigate our emotion, to have them manageable. Our emotions and our beliefs about ourselves are manageable so that I can reason with myself. That's something that EMDR helps us with. And Jaryn mentioned the noticing the negative cognitions, like that if I have a fear, I'm not worthy, or I'm a failure, or people are out to get me, or bad things happen to me, I'm unlovable, like those really harsh negative beliefs about ourselves. We all have some version of that. And so EMDR is really working with those cognitions as well. And I wonder if the more ingrained our negative beliefs about ourselves are, if that is like why we might view our trauma as more intense. You know, I don't quite know, but trauma really tends to connect in with those negative statements about who we are, and we start to have a different relationship or capacity to reason with ourselves about those negative beliefs as we process through trauma.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, people, are curious about how do people change, throughout EMDR? What does that change actually look like? How can you tell when things have been desensitized, right? Like if on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being it's the most distressing thing you've ever experienced, and then 1, it's like it only bothered you a little bit. Say it's at about a 7, whatever the experience is, and they are eventually down to maybe a 4. It's desensitized, but what does that actually look like, and how do you know? But clients often say that, maybe there was a lump in their throat and it doesn't feel as big anymore, or there's a lot of like body scanning that we do to see if
the body. So, and I mean, to my experience working with people with EMDR, there is a variety of difference of how people notice the process, but the disturbance, the level of disturbance we're tracking, and just like Jaryn said, it lessens. Sometimes it spikes up before it lessens with some people, but it changes, and that's what's really interesting when you have an experience of EMDR, and afterwards to have the experience of like, whoa, this is different. I'm touching that thorny bush, and it's like, whoa, that's different. It's reprocessed, it's desensitized. My fear of the worst thing about myself has changed somehow. Now it doesn't completely go away. Those negative beliefs about self, the attachment fears, really take some time to work with. But that also, like, working with attachment fears is a big part of EMDR. Unmet yearnings, attachment yearnings, all this stuff starts to come up. Sometimes with my clients, we just purely target some of that attachment dialogue as it starts to show up. So there's different ways we use EMDR, and it's great with like trauma, what we all would view as trauma, but then it's like also really helpful for all sorts of things.
Yeah, even like smaller T traumas, like trying to think of, say someone's scared of spiders, or right, it could be something really small like that, or
being like I've personally done it. I was like angry at somebody. I'm like, ugh, I'm just like, why am I angry at this person? I'm so tired of being mad. And it was pretty ambiguous for me, or like I didn't quite get it. But with my therapist, we targeted that, and I don't even know. Like, it's interesting when I reflect on my experience. I'm like, I don't quite know how that worked for me, but it helped. Like, the whole context and the story of it, it's just moved through these stories that I didn't realize were connected, and shifted some of that intense emotion. And it's yeah, again, we can target all sorts of things, phobias, whatever's just really causing any distress, whatever, any clinical issue, whatever somebody calls into Sojourn and says, hey, this is bothering me, we can do EMDR on it. Some people don't like EMDR, and if you don't, then you just don't have to do it again. So that's pretty much everything I was thinking of. Any other sort of thoughts or comments?
I don't think so. Other than just I tell that to my clients too. Like, we can try it out, because I think a lot of people are quite hesitant with it at first. But I always say, like, we can try it, and if you feel like it's not for me, or I don't feel like anything is changing, that is totally okay. But I think with some people, it's definitely worth trying, because I've seen a lot of success from it, and I've personally experienced it in my training, and so I believe in it as well.
It works. And then too, as far as trauma is concerned, if like Jaryn and I work with trauma, and not always using EMDR, but it's the same thing as we're like noticing these thorny bushes, and we're trying to desensitize and reprocess. I will say, and I don't know if this is right, but this is how I view it: desensitize the emotion and reprocess the thinking. It just makes sense in my brain. And so that's what my goal is with clients, whether I'm using EMDR or emotionally focused individual or couples or family, is like, how do we take away some of this potency so that we as people can learn how to live in the fullness of our humanity and our pure of heartness. And EMDR is an amazing tool to help work through some of the crap we believe about ourselves and the gross feelings.
Yeah, definitely.
To be put it in clinical language. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jaryn. And then we just talk trauma and trauma strategies. So we'll see if we feel like we missed something. That's what happened last time. Then we can always hop on and add some more stuff to it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.